At 5:47 in the morning, I woke up to something that sounded like war hooves, hammering wet ground branches cracking in the dark. That violent noise that hits your chest before your brain even names it. Then came the smell. Manure mud-crushed blossoms blowing through my screen door before sunrise, like somebody had opened a feedlot inside my house. I ran barefoot to the window, and there they were, 100 black and white Holsteins stomping through my orchard like it was open range. They were in the apple rows my grandfather planted in 1962, tearing through drip lines, flattening young trees, snapping branches off the ones I'd spent 11 years bringing back. 6 mature honey crisps were already down. I froze for maybe 4 seconds. Then I saw her, Renata Holloway, HOA president, parked at the edge of the road in her spotless white SUV, arms folded, giving me that tiny, smug little wave like she'd finally found a way to break me. That wave taught me something. If somebody is arrogant enough to ruin what your family built, you'd better be calm enough to ruin their plan. My name is Cord Beaumont. I inherited 7 acres of apple and pear orchard in the Shenandoah Valley, along with an old cider barn, a pile of repairs, and a family legacy that looked a lot simpler when I was a kid running through the rows. My grandfather Elmer planted the first trees because in our family good land wasn't supposed to sit idle. No branding, no consultant, no grand strategy, just dirt weather and stubbornness. I grew up in that orchard. I knew the sound of bees in blossom season, the smell of warm apple skin in August, the way the Blue Ridge looked right before rain. It wasn't romantic, it was home. When Elmer died in 2009, the place came to me, and I was an HVAC tech with no idea how to run an orchard. Most people told me to sell. I never really considered it. My daughter Waverly made sure of that. She grew up out there the same way I had, mud on her boots, apple juice on her hands, asking better questions than most adults. By 12, she was running the entrance table on pick-your-own weekends, explaining varieties like she'd been born doing it. Every gallon of cider, every fall weekend, every little bit of profit. Part of it went into her college fund. That orchard wasn't just memory, it was her future. For years, Ridgemont Estates left us alone. The subdivision had been built around our land after my grandfather refused to sell, and the older HOA boards had enough sense to respect history. Then, Renata got elected. Retired pharmaceutical sales executive, polished smile, expensive blazer, the kind of woman who'd spent so long getting her way. She mistook that for wisdom. She tried to buy me out twice. I said no twice. That's when the letters started. The first one said my cider barn, built in 1971, long before her HOA existed, was a non-conforming commercial structure. $500 a week until I tore it down or brought it into compliance. I called. Nothing. Wrote back. Nothing. So I did what every reasonable idiot does. I went to the HOA meeting with a folder fax and too much faith in fairness. Before I left, Waverly looked up and said, "You're bringing the folder, right?" "I'm always bringing the folder." What I didn't tell her was that I was also bringing my phone with the recorder running. I'd learned the night before that Virginia is a one-party consent state. By Tuesday, that felt like insurance. The community room smelled like stale coffee and cheap carpet, folding chairs, fluorescent lights, 43 people waiting. That was the first thing that told me this wasn't a meeting, it was an ambush. Renata had spent 2 weeks telling neighbors, my orchard hurt property values, attracted flies, smelled bad, all the usual nonsense people say when they want to make normal work sound dangerous. I stood up, laid out the facts, cited Virginia's right to farm protections, and asked for the fines to be rescinded. Then a man in a good suit stood up from the back row. That was the first twist. Renata had hired an attorney. He started talking about a technical question involving a brief lease my grandfather once made to a cousin around the time the HOA formed. Maybe the orchard counted as continuous agricultural use, maybe it didn't. Nuance, he called it. What he meant was this: Renata had paid somebody to find the one loose thread in my argument and pull it in public. Every time I tried to answer, she cut me off with Robert's rules. Out of order. Not germane. The chair recognizes. So I stopped arguing and asked one question for the record. Was my orchard actually inside the HOA boundary on the county's official plat, not in their CCRs, but on the county map? She dodged it. I walked out into the freezing parking lot feeling like I'd just taken a punch. Then an older man followed me out and said, quiet as weather, I was on the original survey crew in 1998. Your parcel was never supposed to be in that plat. His name was Fletcher Oakes, retired land surveyor. He handed me a card and told me to pull the original survey file before anybody else got clever. Then he drove off. That was the moment the story changed. The next morning I called Davia Merritt, a real estate attorney in Staunton. She told me to go straight to the county office. I did, and there it was on the original 1998 survey. My orchard sat outside the HOA boundary. From there, Renata escalated. 3 zoning complaints in 1 day, retail stormwater food manufacturing. Davia killed 2 fast and had me clean up the 3rd with a permit. But while she was doing that, she found something worse. Somewhere between the original survey and the HOA filing, somebody had inserted my parcel into the boundary without legal authority, without amendment, without my grandfather's consent. In plain English, I had never belonged to that HOA, not once. For a few weeks, Renata went quiet. I almost mistook it for fear. Then came the cattle. You already know how it looked at dawn: busted irrigation, crushed blossoms, mud churned black. Renata smiling from the road like she was watching theater. What you don't know is what happened next. I didn't run outside screaming. I called 911. I called Davia. I turned on every camera I'd installed after that HOA meeting and started documenting everything. The deputies got there fast. They watched the footage and realized the cattle hadn't wandered in. They'd been driven in, men on a TVs pushing them through the fence line. By mid-morning, Waverly was out there beside me with a measuring tape and notebook, helping me log every broken line, every downed tree, every foot of damage. She was 14 and steadier than half the adults in this story. Around 9:31 of Gus Braddock's hired hands pulled into my driveway looking like a man who hadn't slept. He walked up, held out his phone, and showed me a text thread from Renata sent the night before. Make sure they get into the main rows. I want him to see what happens when you fight us. She had put it in writing. I photographed everything, sent it to Davia, and sat down at my kitchen table with coffee and a legal pad, because once somebody gets stupid enough to threaten you in text messages, the job shifts from surviving to finishing. 3 weeks later, Davia called with the part that really changed the war. Because my parcel had been illegally included in the HOA for years, their reserve fund had been calculated against land they had no authority to count. 20 years of improper dues and interest meant one thing: we could go after that money. Better yet, she could freeze the reserve fund while the case was active. That was Renata's safety net. Do it, I said. After that, it stopped being her game. Davia filed for declaratory judgment, trespass, agricultural vandalism, tortious interference, bad faith, attorney's fees, the whole thing. The reserve fund froze. Suddenly, every homeowner in Ridgemont realized their monthly dues were financing a personal vendetta dressed up as leadership. Renata got sloppier. She posted lies in the neighborhood Facebook group. She emailed farmers markets claiming I had health code violations I never had. She even tried to get a judge to shut down my fall pick-your-own season before trial. Judge Presswood denied that motion in 12 minutes. The attorney she'd hired early on withdrew soon after. By trial, the courtroom was full. Neighbors, reporters, board members, Waverly in the second row wearing her orchard flannel-like armor. Fletcher took the stand first and pointed to the original survey. I drew that line, he said, and I know where someone moved it. Then Davia read Renata's text into the record. Slowly, clearly, no drama needed. A room full of her neighbors heard her own words hanging in the air. The judge ruled from the bench that day. My orchard was not and never had been legally inside the HOA. Every fine, every restriction, every demand they'd tried to put on me was void from the beginning. A month later, at the damages hearing, he awarded the whole thing: tree losses, irrigation damage, lost harvest, revenue, attorney's fees, and the disgorgement tied to that reserve fund. Total hit, $175,200 paid from the same fund Renata had counted on to protect herself. She resigned before the recall vote finished. Criminal charges ended in probation and restitution. Gus Braddock paid too. A new board took over. Waverly and I replanted the destroyed Honeycrisps that November, plus 4 more for spite and symmetry. I named the new row after Elmer. And here's the part that stayed with me. Small tyrants survive on one belief above all others: that decent people will get tired before they get organized. That's the trick. They count on your exhaustion. They bet on your silence. But every now and then, if you stay calm long enough and keep records better than they keep lies, you get to watch that bet blow up in their face. A year later, we had the biggest fall festival in the orchard's history. Families everywhere, cider tasting, bluegrass kids running between the rows, Waverly laughing at the gate, good apples and good light. That's what I wanted all along. Not revenge, not headlines, not some big courtroom speech. Just the right to keep growing what my grandfather started without somebody trying to turn legacy into leverage. Still, I'll be honest, there was something deeply satisfying about watching karma put on work boots. So tell me this, when somebody abuses a little local power and tries to wreck a family's future, is it justice to take back every dollar the law allows? Or does it become revenge once the consequences start hurting? Drop your take in the comments. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, a bully, or somebody who thought you were too tired to push back, tell your story too.